Yeah, so I've seen recently quite a few videos about modes, if we need them, we don't need them, and they all seem to be quite polarizing, meaning we don't need them, we do need them. There's never this kind of gray area, and I think the answer to that is it depends. And in my experience, because I play in different styles, different genres, different bands, I've played from the more intellectual stuff like jazz and maybe classical to more feel-based music like blues, rock, and stuff like that. There is no one-size-fits-all kind of thing here. In my experience, music comes first, and then theory is just a description, of music. You try to describe music, the interaction between the function of notes, the interaction between notes, distances, the chords, function of chord progressions, stuff like that. And of course, I would say I'm a trained musician. I went to college, trained in classical music, I trained in jazz. The description of music has nothing to do with music in itself. And I would say that the important thing to understand in any style is the concept of trying to find the key, okay, the originating key or the key of the moment, because obviously if there's modulation, you need to try to find, to be able to find the key, and you can find it by getting that idea of home, so to speak, the home root, home note, if it's major or minor, you go through a certain amount of, you ask yourself a certain amount of questions, and then by answering those questions, you figure out what key that tune is in. And I would say that you could consider a mode a key. There are certain systems like the Lydian concept where is it George Russell that would consider everything from the Lydian. So I would say in general, you want to know modes. First of all, if you're a professional musician, I would say is best, because then you can communicate with musicians that are maybe more intellectual or more that play styles of music that require certain thinking, certain more intellectual thinking, so to speak, like jazz and fusion, so to speak. As much as there are jazz players that don't know anything about theory and they sound fantastic. But in general, I would say that there are styles of music that require more knowledge of modes. As much as you can call, let's say, Dorian, you can say D Dorian, you can still call it key of C major. You can reverse engineer, and you can go back to what key center. There are a lot of jazz players, old school jazz players, that do that. They don't know. They don't talk about modes. They talk about phrases, and they talk about key centers. Okay, and they talk about 2-5-1s like chord progressions. But I would say that when you get into more modern, like fusion styles, then obviously it's easier if you know how to communicate by modes, by mentioning the name of the mode, because obviously that cuts off a bit of reasoning in terms of going back to the originating key. So let's say if we are in the key of C, and there's a flat 7/7, which is B flat 7, flat 5. If you know that requires B flat Lydian flat 7, yeah, it's easy to call it that way rather than say F melodic minor, so to speak. And so that's really the reasoning. It's just ease of communicating. Okay, and sometimes people would argue that certain modes have a particular sound, like the major scale. You could say it's happy. The Lydian scale is a bit dreamy. I made a video about this. I will link everything in the description and a pinned comment, as always. So yeah, you can communicate to another musician or communicate the feel of a particular mode by just talking about that mode, because people that reason in modes, they have a clearer idea of what's going on, so to speak. And that's been, the way of communicating for now decades. I would say then you can make a partition, so to speak, but then again, it's not super clear in terms of styles that require more thinking about the home key. So like rock music, country bluegrass, and classical in the more traditional sense, so to speak, like where classical to me is more about interpretation rather than you playing certain tunes. You're not thinking too much about how the tune is composed unless you're a composer in which case maybe you're thinking more in terms of like themes and developing the themes, stuff like that. Again, electronic dance music and stuff like that usually is based about production, so it's not, you're not really required to know modes. Certain other styles, it's much easier if you can think in modes, so fusion, jazz, and some styles like that derive from jazz, like R&B, new soul, that kind of stuff. New R&B, new soul, whatever you would call it. Some world music is based on certain Phrygian, that kind of stuff, world music. But then again, and jazz and funk. And then again, sometimes because it's just ease of communication. If you say, well, this jazz funk tune is based on D Dorian, then everybody usually will know what you mean, rather than say C major and the first chord is D minor. I think that's easier. As much as like certain style, let's say if you play R&B with a church band, so to speak, people that come up in church, they tend to call numbers. Everything is related to the major. So even if a tune is in minor, they all think from the relative major, so to speak. Same thing like Nashville system is slightly different. So you can see that every style has its own system of reasoning. So it's not as simple as saying, do you need modes? Yes. Do you need modes? No. Of course, the more you know, the better it is. Sometimes, if you're purely a feel player, sometimes it's better not to know. And sometimes if you're like a purist, like I'm a jazz player, you want to try and convince other people that you need modes, where, a rock player might play Oyo Como Va, that's usually the example that is brought up when you play Oyo Como Va, which is A minor 7, D7, which you can analyze as A minor Dorian or D Mixolydian or G major. Then obviously if somebody calls it as A minor, as long as you know that it's not a natural minor, it comes from G major, not C major. So these are basically, I'm making the same kind of reasoning, but describing it in different ways, so to speak. And if you have the mental capacity and elasticity to do both, that's great. If you cannot do only one of the two, that's fine. If you're a feel player, you just try and find notes by feel. I know phenomenal musicians that are professional musicians and doing great tours without knowing anything about theory, or should I say basic theory. Obviously, they're great. They're great tones, great sounds, great feel. They're great people. There are many reasons why you call as a musician. But in terms of purely the knowing the modes, I would say modes apply to a certain type of player. And if you want to communicate with that type of player, you need to understand what modes are. Dip your toes in modes and check out the other videos that I made so that you can get an idea of the system. And I would say, if you disagree, leave a comment. If you have more things to say about this, leave a comment. If you have anything to add or correct in terms of that's something that I've said that is incorrect, just leave a comment. So this was my short video trying to make sense of, if you want to use up some time to learn modes or not, if you need them or not. Obviously, it's something you need to enjoy doing. If your mindset is that of more intellectual stuff, go for it. But in general, I would say that it's up to you. If you don't enjoy it, don't do it. The world is not going to end. Of course, as always, if you found any value in this video, feel free to share it, like, subscribe. Check out the links in the description if you want to support the channel. There's plenty of stuff that I do, educational material, patches for modelers, and like, subscribe, the usual stuff. I'm trying to get more subscribers, get to 5,000. Take care. Bye-bye.